One of the most life-changing things I've learned in my 27 years of existence is the difference between love and codependency. In this video, I'm gonna talk about how I evolved away from the codependent relationship model that our society teaches is love, and into a more happy, healthy, fulfilling place when it comes to romantic relationships and even friendships.
Zelf.
On the shelf.
Just as a quick FYI for any new viewers that are watching, I don't have any kind of formal psychology qualifications. I'm just a person who is passionate about psychology and who's passionate about these things I'm talking about because I want us all to have happier, more fulfilling relationships, because good relationships are the foundation of a happy life and ultimately of happy societies, and I want to live in a happier society. John DeLynn, a psychologist and an ex-Mormon podcaster, once explained codependency to me using this really simple analogy that I love. He said that when you have two codependent people in a relationship, they're like this. They're propping each other up so that if one of them falls, they both fall. Or if one of them goes away, the other one falls. In a healthy relationship, both people are standing up on their own. And if one of them falls down, the other one's fine. You know, they're not depending on each other to stay up. Now, the idea that codependency is love has permeated our culture for so long, and I think one of the most obvious ways you can see it is in romantic comedies. They almost always have characters giving these big speeches, declarations of love, that will usually include some variation of like, I can't live without you, before you I was nothing and now you've completed me, some version of that sentiment. I think these films have played a really big role in shaping a lot of people's perceptions of relationships and what romance and romantic partnerships should look like. I know they affected me a lot growing up because we sort of hold up these, big romance stories like, The Notebook or whatever other rom-com it is as the ideal when it comes to love, when actually they're not the ideal at all, and they're perpetuating a lot of really kind of toxic perceptions of romantic relationships and what a healthy relationship looks like. One of my favorite books I've ever read is called Inner Bonding. It's by Margaret Paul, and it's about breaking free from codependency so that you can have happier, healthier, more fulfilling relationships. This book changed my life, and I really, really recommend it to everyone. I'm not going to do justice to the concepts we're talking about in this video in the same way that, an actual doctor can do in an actual book. So I'll link it in the description box. But in Inner Bonding, Margaret Paul explains how in codependent relationships, there is usually one person who feels like the other person is responsible for their feelings and another person who feels like they are responsible for their partner's feelings. She calls the person who feels like the other person is responsible for their feelings the narcissist, which doesn't mean that they have narcissistic personality disorder or that they're the bad guy in the dynamic. It's just a term she employs. And the person who feels like they are responsible for their partner's feelings, she calls the codependent. So both people in this dynamic are codependent, but those are the terms she employs just for easier distinction. I know a lot of you watching are ex-Mormons, so I just want to talk a little bit about how codependent Mormonism's view of relationships is. One of the core doctrines of Mormonism is that you need to be in a heterosexual romantic partnership, marriage, eternal marriage, in order to enter the highest level of the celestial kingdom. You literally aren't complete until you've partnered with this person, your eternal companion. This idea permeates the religion so heavily that it's not uncommon to see 18-year-old Mormon girls get married, or Mormon boys who are, just barely into their 20s right off the mission getting married. Which means they've gone from being under the authority of their parents or perhaps a mission president right into marriage, leaving them ripe for codependency. Side note, the church is very aware of this to a certain degree, and I think that's definitely why they promote marriage so young. They know that people are less likely to leave the church if they get married young, because then they're part of this unit that they can't break away from, but that's another video. Once people are married in Mormonism, the church encourages them to have what I would consider extremely enmeshed lives, to the point where close friendships with the opposite sex are discouraged. I've had a lot of conversations with ex-Mormons about codependency in romantic relationships because I'm not very fun at parties. And over the years, I've observed a few pretty glaring patterns. One of them, which I'm sure is not unfamiliar to a lot of you, is Mormon men being raised to just completely repress their feelings. And obviously when we're raised, conditioned to repress our feelings, we don't learn how to healthily process and manage them. which once again leaves us ripe for unhealthy codependent relationships. As a result of this harmful conditioning, Mormon men are quite often people pleasers, which as a society we tend to view as kind of a positive thing, because, you know, who doesn't like people who always want to help people and who are very agreeable? But it's actually not as great as it sounds. According to psychologists like Margaret Paul, people-pleasing is an inability to enforce healthy boundaries, and it's actually a way that people try to control other people's opinions of them by always doing what they want them to do, even when it hurts them. To be truly loving to others, you need to be loving to yourself first, otherwise you're going to end up doing more harm than good. Only when you love yourself can you properly give love to others, because only then can you do it without trying to gain something like approval or security or whatever it is. Just something I've observed is that a lot of ex-Mormon men who are divorced have told me that while married, they felt so responsible for their wives' feelings that it just destroyed them. They were totally disregarding what was going on in their bodies and their minds and like not taking care of that. So over time, it just really broke them down and like had such a negative impact on them. This obviously isn't a gendered issue. That's just something I've observed a lot from like my convenient sample of people I talk to. But I just thought it was an interesting example of how codependency can play out in Mormonism. So Mormon men who are raised to believe that their feelings don't matter don't develop the ability to notice and healthily manage them. This, as you'd imagine, often ends up causing resentment because the person who feels like they're responsible for their partner's feelings kind of feels controlled by that person, the narcissist in the dynamic, when the truth is that neither person has learned how to set and enforce healthy boundaries or be emotionally self-sufficient. So they're co-creating this unhealthy dynamic. Most of us can only handle feeling responsible for someone else's feelings for so long. Like if someone, a partner or even a friend, puts all of their stuff on us and we make it a priority and focus on it to the detriment of our own well-being, then eventually we're going to break. It's apparently really common in this typical narcissist-codependent dynamic for the narcissist to sort of obliviously dump all their stuff on the other person for a long time, thinking it's fine and that things are all good, and then just get totally blindsided one day when the codependent person, understandably, you know, blows up in frustration or just leaves the relationship altogether because they just can't take it anymore. I really recommend reading Inner Bonding by Margaret Paul because she outlines these concepts that I'm talking about in a much more detailed, thorough way than I can do in this brief video. But I'm just hoping I'll get some of you thinking about your relationship patterns, because I do think that these dynamics I learned from this book after reading endless examples of narcissist codependent dynamics. I was like, that's everyone. Like that's basically every couple I know has a version of that, including like my past relationships. I mean, not everyone, that's an exaggeration. Like some couples are really good at being emotionally self-sufficient, but I hadn't had a ton of examples of them in my life. So yeah, it was kind of crazy reading this stuff and again, just realizing how our society's entire model for romantic relationships is codependent. And she gives so many good examples that like really highlight the ways that it's hurting us and hurting the relationship. So read Inner Bonding, it's in the description box. Just want to plug it constantly throughout this video. So back to my attempt to explain this stuff. Basically, narcissists in the narcissist codependent dynamic feel like it's their partner's job to take care of their feelings. Now, obviously this can be like a sort of subconscious belief that informs actions. It's not like many people walk around thinking, my partner is responsible for how I feel. Like, obviously it's not that blatant most of the time. But basically they feel like it's their partner's job to make them feel okay when it isn't. As a result, their feelings typically take center stage in the relationship, and the codependent's feelings are either sort of pushed to the side or sometimes just not acknowledged at all. Like codependents, narcissists haven't learned how to healthily process emotions on their own, so they look to someone else to try and feel complete. But as I hope we all know, another person can't complete us. So these codependent relationships will typically lead to a ton of resentment and frustration down the line because, of course, I personally think this is why relationships fail so much. Like why there's so much divorce, there's so much breaking up. And I'm like very pro divorce, very pro breaking up, because I think another thing is just that people grow and you aren't necessarily going to grow in the same ways with someone forever. But outside of that, like I just think we need to understand this stuff to have healthy relationships and blah, blah, blah. As humans, we tend to do what's familiar to us. So say a Mormon boy who's raised to believe that his feelings don't matter will naturally be more drawn towards partners who want someone to take care of their feelings for them, because you know, this boy doesn't know how to healthily honor his own feelings, but he knows how to be there for someone else. He knows how to do what he's told. He knows how to put other people's opinions and feelings before his own. even when it harms him. So that's what he will seek out in a partner a lot of the time. Once you recognize codependent patterns in your relationship, you can start doing something about them. Now, this is not an easy task, because if you've spent a lifetime of expecting other people to absorb your feelings or repressing your own feelings and putting someone else's feelings before your own, that's going to take a lot of time to unlearn those patterns and those ways of thinking. For example, people that have historically been codependent can feel really guilty when they try and start putting their feelings first, and they can feel like they're selfish. And sometimes if their partners aren't clued in on this stuff, they can sort of treat them like that's the case too, which sucks. For that reason, I feel like therapy can be so good for so many people, because a lot of this stuff is like so rooted in unhealed trauma. So yeah, it can take a lot of work, but in my experience, it's totally worth the work that you put in. I just want to give some of my personal advice for overcoming codependency, just based on what I've done and what works for me. And yeah, maybe it will give some of you some good ideas. It's pretty obvious advice that you probably hear all the time, but maybe looking at it through a new lens will be helpful. So the first thing you need to do, sounds simple, but it isn't. It's just to start noticing your feelings as they arise. If you're raised to believe that your feelings don't matter, then this can be really, really hard. It's like literally learning a new skill. So it's going to take time, and it's going to take a while before it's your new norm. I found that if you struggle identifying exactly what you're feeling in a given moment, because sometimes we'll feel sort of like a general unease or anxiety, but we can't quite pinpoint it, journaling can be really useful at sort of working out what you might feel. And even if you can't necessarily put words to the emotions you're feeling, if you can just describe like the sensations in your body, you know, like tightness in chest or churning stomach, or you know, whatever it is, that's like a helpful way to start moving towards understanding your feelings better. And hopefully over time you'll be better able to identify potential reasons why you feel how you feel in any given moment. Basically, you just want to get into the habit of recognizing how you're feeling, and how you feel is influenced by external things, especially relationships. This is something we all should have just learned as children, but most of us didn't, so here we are, doing it as adults. So fun. Shout out to all the parents who are teaching their kids to healthily recognize and process their emotions, because like, it just sounds like such a superpower to have been raised with that from when you were a kid. Like, I can't even imagine. I'd be so healthy. So if you regularly leave conversations with your partner feeling anxious or drained or upset, that's really important data that's worth paying attention to. Same goes for friends or your boss or anyone else in your life. You just want to start noticing how different people make you feel. As you start to pay attention to your feelings better and understand them a bit better, you'll hopefully be able to identify specific roots of them better as well, which means you can start thinking about what healthy boundaries you might need to set and enforce in your life to be happier and healthier. So once you've recognized how you feel, it's really important that you take responsibility for processing those feelings and managing them yourself. This also means that you don't take it upon yourself to fix anyone else's feelings for them. You can be supportive to other people, but you can't fix their feelings for them. You can't take away their feelings. They have to be their own primary emotional support. It shouldn't be you. So take responsibility for processing your own emotions, just yours. And involved in that is developing healthy practices for managing them. This is the fun part. This is the part I like. For example, when I'm feeling depressed or anxious, I will often go to the gym or I'll go for a walk, because exercise is the single best way to complete the stress response cycle. I feel like we all need to get this tattooed on our hands, because we all hear a lot like exercise is really good for depression or anxiety, but like, it's the single best way to complete the stress response cycle. So if you're feeling that kind of general anxiety, you don't know why, or you just had a stressful, anxious day, like your body will stay in that state until you do something that completes the cycle. Crying is a way that you can complete that stress response cycle, but usually you cry way later than you should have completed the stress response cycle. So like, you need to be exercising. Like, exercise is the best. I know it kind of sucks that that's like the thing we need to do, but it is. Like, we're designed to be seeing a lion, the anxiety trigger, running away from the lion, then safety, tells our body that everything's good. But like, we're not doing that in our society. We're not completing our stress response cycles. Our bodies are not getting the message that the things that are making us anxious are no longer a threat or any of it. Like, especially because so many threats in our society are sort of like these vague mental things. Anyway, exercise, single best way to complete the stress response cycle. I like to just do 30 minutes of sort of speedy-ish walking on a treadmill with an incline in the winter, or if it's the summer, I just go outside and walk and it's lovely. I also like to journal about my feelings when they get really intense, just so I can get really clear on how I'm feeling, and also so I can sort of set intentions or make a plan for how I want to deal with a situation, even if the situation is just a feeling, moving forward. For example, if I'm feeling really anxious about politics, as I often am, I might write in my journal how I'm feeling and set the intention to spend less time on social media and kind of affirm to myself the importance of staying present in my body and not getting swept up in things that are beyond my control. Because even if they're important, if I'm not present and sort of healthy in my body and, you know, grounded in myself, then I can't do anything about it. I mean, I probably can't do anything about it either way, but like any efforts I make to try and improve politics, what does that, you know, like be a good citizen in that area, they need to come from a place of me being healthy. They can't come from this like frantic, like, you know, that's just not going to be good for anyone involved. And I don't deserve that, and you don't deserve that. So don't put too much on yourself. Meditation is also a really massive part of me having good mental health. So I try and do that even when it's hard. I know it can be really hard. For those of you who are not meditators, who haven't really got into meditation yet, I really, really recommend the Headspace app. That app taught me how to meditate and seriously changed my life. And I fully recommend getting the premium subscription. I think it's $90 a year. So worth it. So worth it. A lot of us often fall into the trap of thinking that what we're feeling in challenging times is way too big and horrible for things like exercise, journaling, meditation to have any kind of positive impact, but that's generally not true. I've historically got into these modes of thinking where I'm like, no one has ever been this depressed ever. There's nothing I can do to make this better. Like, I'm probably just gonna die. And like, I mean, it's like I'm phrasing it in like an amusing way right now, but it's very real when you're in those feelings. Obviously, if you are having like really serious mental health issues, then you probably do need to enlist the help of a professional to help you navigate those feelings and healthily manage them. But different thing, gonna put that aside. Basically, what we all need to remember is that all feelings are temporary. And when we start being able to observe, you know, the different waves of what we're feeling without identifying so fully with those feelings, they're a lot easier to manage. Also, if we feel like our feelings are impossible for us to manage and it's not a task that we want to take on, why would we expect our partner to want to take it on or be able to take it on, you know? It's really important that all of us know how to set and enforce healthy boundaries in our lives, especially with romantic partners. It's not healthy for us to constantly absorb someone else's feelings and feel like we're responsible for them. So if you do have someone in your life who's making you feel like that, it's really important that you develop the ability to enforce boundaries. You can make it super clear that you love them and you support them and you want to be there for them in appropriate ways, but you have to take care of yourself first. Otherwise, you can't be a good partner. You cannot be a good partner to someone else if you are not a good partner to yourself. I know this can be really, really hard, especially if there's resistance from the other person and they don't understand the importance of these concepts, but it is essential. So please make it a priority. Like I said before, becoming emotionally self-sufficient is a really big task, especially if it's something that's brand new for you, as I think it is for a lot of people leaving Mormonism. Like it is a new thing. And not even just in Mormonism, just in the world generally, we're not taught how to do this stuff. So it is a lot of work. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to experience and practice, and you know, there's progress isn't always linear and all that stuff, but it's so worth it. I recently wrote a short article about what I think healthy romantic partnerships actually look like. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to link it in the description box. I think it has some valuable stuff in it. I really want to turn the time over to you guys now and have you share in the comments your experiences with codependency, how it's affected you, maybe what things you've done in your life to better honor your feelings and, you know, create healthier romantic partnerships. Because I'm young, I'm still learning a lot, and I'm always very interested in hearing other people's opinions about this stuff. If you found this video valuable and you want to help us make more videos like it, please consider supporting us on Patreon. We will have a link in the description box. And thank you so much to our patrons for supporting us already. You guys are great. I hope that this video did give you some food for thought, and yeah, I think it's something that's really important that we all need to be very aware of. I think to a degree it is a lifelong journey, learning how to be emotionally self-sufficient, or you know, maybe it's something that we're good at certain times and we can get bad at again. Like, it's kind of something we always have to be mindful of and keep in check. So yeah, hope this video helped some of you. And I'm excited to read the comments and learn more about your guys' experience.